I asked for questions a couple weeks ago on Facebook, and it's time to answer them. There are a lot, so get comfortable and let's get started. First, Troy didn't ask one question. Troy has 5 questions. So, number 1 is, what bags do you use to transport your gear? And that's a great question. I'm almost always going from one place to another, whether it's something nearby or hours away. And I have several bags. And what I use depends on my gear and where I'm going. I have a low pro sling pack, a Timbuktu snoot bag, an Amazon Basics backpack, various Nikon bags. The low pro gets the long range duty, like when I flew to Seattle a few weeks ago. When I'm going out to shoot for the day, either near my house or at a destination, I simply put one camera with one lens attached into my Camelback. There is room for another lens or two if needed, but I really like to keep it light when I'm actually in the mode of taking pictures. I consider the larger bags that hold more gear to be the way to get all of my items from point A to point B for a trip. Number 2 from Troy. How often do you clean your photo equipment? I am in dusty conditions fairly often, so I clean the outside of my gear with a soft cloth or one of these blowers, but I only clean my sensors once in a while. There's a few different products out there that will help you clean your sensor, but it's a risky proposition if something goes wrong. So if you're not sure about doing that aspect yourself, it's not very expensive to have it done professionally. Number 3, have you ever turned down a photo shoot and why? Yes, and for different reasons. The most common reasons are when I simply don't connect with the client or when a project doesn't interest me. I do my best work when I'm shooting something that I love. If I don't love the idea of the shoot, I will definitely help a client find someone who will, though. On to number 4. I am looking to upgrade my camera soon. Since you have tested out the D810 and D750, which do you prefer? Since I am upgrading from a Nikon D80, I don't know if I want to drift to FX or get the D7100DX. I am an avid enthusiast, drifting to semi-pro. I kind of shoot a little of everything, sports, landscape, portraits, so far one wedding, creative stuff. Just want to know your opinion. Without knowing more details on why you want to upgrade, I'd suggest the D7100. I know a lot of people want to go FX because they think it's better or more professional. And the manufacturers, they always want you to desire that next big investment in a camera body, but the vast majority of shooters won't see a difference between a full frame camera and a crop sensor camera. So for most people, most of the time, I'd say stick with DX if you have it already, and maybe even stick with the camera you have, and then invest in good lenses if you don't have them already in your collection. That said, the D80 is a bit older, and the new bodies have more features, particularly better autofocus and low light capability. So I don't really know what you like to photograph, so if you do have a specific problem you're trying to solve, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to work through it with you to figure out the best move. Full disclosure though, I do shoot FX most of the time when I'm not shooting with my DX D300S, which is also a great DX camera that is on the used market right now. Last one from Troy, number 5. What tripod do you use? Keep up the great work. Thanks. I use cheap tripods. I really like this Amazon Basics one that I got in a special kit deal with my D810. A lot of people turn their nose up at my tripods when they see them in my videos, but I don't really use them out in the field. Without a tripod in the field, the ability to change ISO from shot to shot helps you maintain good handheld shutter speeds in darker conditions. And I've been known to brace my camera on just about anything around when needed. I mostly use them for what I'm doing now, being the camera operator and the speaker, and looking at the setup, my little Amazon Basics tripod seems to be doing the job. Jesse asks, wondering about gear, is there any reason for an amateur photographer to upgrade to full frame from crop sensor? Just curious. By the way, going to join back up as VIP, missed the knowledge. Well, Jesse, I'm glad you want to come back to the VIP club. If any of you aren't familiar with my VIP membership, you can learn more at snapchick.com. As for upgrading, some people will probably get annoyed at me for saying this, but I believe that most people wouldn't notice a difference in the results between a full frame body and a crop sensor body. If you think you will notice a difference and you think it will change your photography, then go for it. However, you will hear me say a lot that upgrading your skills and vision will go further than going from a crop sensor to a full frame sensor. And as I said to Troy, if there's a specific technique that you want to talk about with respect to sensor size, let me know and we can figure out what would be a good route for you. Bacchus says, I got the Rokinon 85mm f1.4 lens Saturday based on your suggestion. Now, how do I use it effectively? Please advise. I am using the D3300. You take photos with it. A lot of them. My advice is to not shoot wide open all the time. A lot of people think that they should shoot an f1.4 lens at f1.4 all the time. Quite often, people have written to me and said, since I paid the premium for f1.4, I'm going to shoot at f1.4 all the time. However, many lenses get softer at their widest aperture, and some people who write to me don't realize how shallow the depth of field can really be at very wide apertures. F1.4 is not a magical setting for everything. It might be what you want some of the time, and in the next shot, setting f8 might be more appropriate for the desired result. How will you know the best settings for that lens for you? Experiment, and be patient with the lens and yourself. It's going to work great for you, but it might be a learning process. Now, Kevin asks a cool question. He says, one shoot you haven't done, but you want to. I say that if I were to do any shoot that I haven't done yet, the list is long. But my shoots aren't just shoots, they're adventures. And one that may seem vanilla to all of you, but is a huge goal of mine, is to hike rim to rim to rim at the Grand Canyon all at once and share it with you guys in photos and in video. Jamie asked, what did you say on your letter to Santa this year? I said, Dear Santa, bring me some snow. I got a little bit of it, but I'm still hoping for more. Ron says, a simple one. Is that an IKEA bookcase? If so, what kind of dividers did you use to make the small 4-hole shelves? That's a very popular question. These are from IKEA. They're great for keeping everything in one place while still keeping it in different sections. I store my gear by lenses, camera bodies, batteries, bags, boxes, microphones. You get the point. The one that I sometimes have behind me in my videos has 25 sections, and it was called Expedite. The dividers that turn one large area into 4 smaller areas were an add-on that I purchased separately. They don't make this particular version of the shelves anymore, but they do have something extremely similar called Kallax. They're almost identical to the ones that I have, but the outside edges are a little slimmer. The interior dimensions are exactly the same. A lot of people who collect these like these shelves because they're the perfect size. Davina asks, why do you love photography? What drew you to it? Oh gosh, why is such an interesting question? I've always liked it. I feel like I've always looked at the world a little differently than others, and I like capturing that. Varun, what precautions and planning would you suggest for landscape photography, and type of lens too? Planning is a part of the precautions I take. I like to know where I'm going and what I'll be doing because I rarely drive somewhere to take photos and not hike too. So I like to plan my gear according to that. One of the most important things for me is to not overpack, so I'm not lugging stuff around and not enjoying the area. When I'm enjoying myself, I'm taking better pictures. And as for lenses, I like to have a wide angle and maybe even an ultra wide, but sometimes I like telephoto to capture details and wildlife. Somyadeep asks, hi SnapChick, did you ever use third-party speedlights like Nissan or Yongnuo? How do they compare to the Nikon SB900 or 910? Thanks. I do have a very basic third-party flash, so I got with this old D50 camera that I purchased secondhand, but I haven't done much with it. I have heard from some viewers that they've been happy with their third-party speedlights. I like the reliability that I've had from Nikon speedlights, but if the price is right and if you don't mind doing a little experimenting, I would trust that the more popular third-party models will do the job. Fred says, hi Leigh, what do you think of 500 pics? Is it a good way to sell and make money from photography? Also, what do you think of their licensing? Hi Fred. Stock photography is difficult to break into and make good money these days, but I do think that diversifying your photography business is smart. As for their licensing and fees, a lot of people are arguing about whether it is good or bad. They say, the fee percentage is great. The fee percentage is insulting. Anyone with an iPhone will be able to sell their work. Why would they go with social popularity to rate images? Your work will get purchased and then stolen left and right. And it goes on and on. And Fred, now you've done it, because reading those arguments has opened up a can of worms in my mind, and I'm going to try to convey some of it right now. I think that photography can be art, but it can also be a commodity. And I think that the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Art doesn't need to be fancy. Let's think about furniture. Maybe simple furniture like IKEA. The form usually follows function with nothing excessive, but each product also has its own distinct style. And that style is art, but we're still talking about commodity furniture. To me, stock images can be the same way. A simple commodity still holding its own on style. It's up to each one of us to decide how we approach our photography, what we do with our photography, how we want to put it out there to the world, and what it's worth to us to share it. You are probably looking for a simple answer here, and I just don't think there is one. There's no right or wrong answer to if or where or for how much you try to sell your work. The question of worth and which way to sell is definitely going to be different for every person. On to another fairly deep question, this time from Joel. Can you give some insight as to when a model release is needed and when it is not? I've photographed some public events but have been concerned about posting pics to sites like Flickr without a release. Well, first of all, I am not an attorney, so if you are concerned about it, you'd do well to consult with one. But with that disclaimer out of the way, I can tell you what I do. My mom always said two things: that it's better to be safe than sorry, and that you should always treat others the way you would like to be treated. Well, my mom actually is full of wisdom. She always told me not to get pregnant in college, but I don't think that applies here. Anyway, back to model releases. If I'm taking photos for private use, if someone's in public, they're fair game to me. If I'm doing anything else, if I'm putting something in my portfolio, if I'm putting something up on SnapChick's Facebook page, if the person is identifiable in the photo, I always make sure that it's okay with the person. If the person is the subject of the photo, I get a model release, which states the exact purpose that I will use the photo for. And I always get a release of any models that I have in for SnapChick.com shoots. No one has time for a lawsuit, so for me, it's best to be proactive and safe. Now for a question from Antonio. I have a Canon 7D. What lenses are best for doing studio portrait type of photography, and what lens works best at air shows where the aircraft are moving fast but want to capture a wide area and also zoom in on a fast-moving object? There's no one best answer for this question, but I can give you a few ideas. For studio portrait photography, I particularly like primes because they are so wonderfully crisp. Something like a field of view of 85 millimeters is popular for single person portraits, and wider, like 50 millimeters, for larger group portraits. So for your crop sensor DSLR, a 50 millimeter or a 35 millimeter lens, respectively. As for air shows, you have the luxury of lots of light, so you don't necessarily need a lens that opens up to a wide aperture. Look at something like the 18-200 variable aperture lens. It will give you loads of flexibility in field of view. 1 minute, you could be up close to an aircraft on the ground shooting wide angles. The next moment, you can be zooming in on an aircraft doing a flyby. Sean wants to know, can Canon SLR lenses and 2x magnifiers be cleaned internally? You can. It is risky and definitely voids the warranty. I'd send them in for cleaning. Now, it takes a lot of gunk inside of a lens to visibly degrade image quality because of the internal portion of the lens being so far out of focus. Let me know if you're talking about just a little bit of dust or a whole lot of gunk. Macro Tiger says, Snapsterson. Macroerson. Ralph, if you are a Star Wars character, which one would you be and why? And again, the same question with Star Trek. Oh, hell. You guys are making my brain work today with these questions. For Star Wars, I'd like to think of myself as Han Solo, but in actuality, I'm probably C-3PO. As for Star Trek, I always really liked Geordi's visor. As a kid, I was always walking around with my banana clip over my eyes, so probably him. Dill Palm says, what was your first DSLR? Which lens do you recommend for landscape photography on a Nikon? My first DSLR was a Nikon D100. It's old and broken these days, so it takes a fair amount of abuse. Lenses for landscape on Nikon. It depends upon your camera and what you're doing. Shoot me a private message or an email and I can help you more. Ahmed says, what about Apple apps in photography like Aperture? I love Aperture. A lot. I'm interested to see what its successor photos will be like. Tim, what lenses would you use to shoot a wedding? What kind of strobes/speed lights would you use? It depends on the wedding, as no two are the same, but I always like a wide angle, zoom, and a telephoto for the ceremony. If it's indoors, constant aperture lenses such as Nikon's 24-70 f2.8 and 70-200 f2.8 are virtually a necessity. If you don't need the flexibility of a zoom, prime lenses will give you low light capability for a much lower price. As for flash, I would use my SB800s if I need to during portraits and the reception. Don't take what I've just said as the rule, though. These are general statements on gear. There are weddings in giant churches, or weddings in small chapels, or weddings in a courthouse. It's all different. The best thing you can do is to become familiar with the venue beforehand and use that gained confidence to define your gear choices. Chris has a common question. I'm looking for a new camera. I shoot a lot in landscapes and portraits. Lately, I have become a big fan of mirrorless and want one. So Fuji X-T1 and Olympus OMD-EM1 are my primary picks. Any advice? My advice is to get each in your hands and play around with it, even if it's just in a shop somewhere. Scroll through the menus, check out where you make adjustments, and actually just see how they feel in your hands. One or the other will probably speak to you. Juan has a bunch of questions. What software would you recommend for editing pictures for beginners? It doesn't have to be expensive at all, just something that can do RAW files. And speaking of RAW, do you have a video on how to edit RAW files? I'm interested in a wide-angle lens for my Nikon D5000. Any suggestions? And what do you think of Lens Baby? Thank you. Oh, and have you tried these bars? And he put a photo up of a nutrition bar. A good, simple photo editing software, Picasa. It is a download from Google, and it will edit RAW files, and it's free. I do not have a video on editing RAW files, but check out my friend Jack over at Faded Focus Photography on YouTube. He's got lots of editing videos. He uses more expensive software, but you can get some great ideas from him. And a wide-angle lens for your D5000. Do you have the 18-55 kit lens? If so, what do you find lacking with it? If you want to go wider, take a look at the 10-24mm f3.5 to f4.5. If you need to shoot in lower light, check out the 17-55 f2.8. As for Lens Baby, I do have one. I don't use it a lot. I just haven't been able to work it into my style. Some people love them though. It's definitely a personal style choice. And no, I haven't tried that kind of bar, but I'm always looking for new things to try. John wants to know, are you too much of a vegan to try out meat dishes at friends' parties? No, I don't try out meat dishes. Eugene, please help me. Nikon D300 and D300S, D200. Which one should I go for? Please help. D300S. It's the newest of the ones you mentioned, and mine is still very much in service. For crop sensor cameras, it continues to be my number one choice. Suan says, I see a plastic toy camera there to the left. I think you mean my cute and lovable Canon Rebel T4i. It's a great entry-level camera. It's enjoyable to shoot with, and it helps me test out any Canon lenses and accessories that come my way. Michael, up until now, I have had no trouble with sunsets. Then I purchased the Nikon D5200, and all of my sunsets look like nuclear explosions. How can I get a good sunset shot with the D5200? What do you mean by nuclear explosions? Do you mean overexposed? Email me a sample shot and make it an original camera file so that I can see all of the settings in the image data and I can help you out. Now, Philip has a very important question. If you had to choose one Lego set to photograph, which would it be? And I'm going to be a little sneaky and say the Lego Architecture Studio. I can make my own designs and spend hours photographing them in all different lighting and from different angles. I find the whole process extremely relaxing. I even built my dream headquarters here. Drazen, suggest me something. New one Nikon cam, something in middle high range. Till now I got Canon. S2 is now I want to buy. If you like the Nikon S2, go for it. The Nikon 1 series is great. A camera like the S2 has a decent size sensor for a small camera, and it can be expanded with different lenses. I use my Nikon V1 all of the time, which is an earlier camera in the same system. Gary says, when did you get into photography and why? Well, I first decided that I was a photographer when I was a kid, but didn't really get into it until I was older. I just always liked it, from the gear itself to capturing images to reviewing and learning from them. I mentioned earlier that I always saw things in a different way, and as I grew up, photography was an artistic and technical outlet for me. Jason says, I'm using Lightroom 5.3. I have accumulated several libraries over the years since Lightroom 2, but I really want just one library. My libraries stretch over 3 smaller hard drives. I'd like them all on one large one, which I can have multiple copies of. Okay, any ideas? Okay. Ideas for a large drive or for ways to move everything? Shoot me a message with more details and I can help you out. Claudius, would be interesting to know why you have chosen the D810 over the D750. The D750 has a lot of features of the D810 and is less expensive, and the D750 is Popular Photography Magazine DSLR of the Year. Well, first, I don't care what a magazine says about what the best camera is. The D750 is a good camera. It just wasn't the camera for me. One of the things that swayed my decision is the control scheme. I prefer the control scheme of the D810. I like the durability, the resolution, and the results. I'd never steer anyone away from the D750, but it just wasn't the best choice for me. Detlef asks, which do you prefer, D750, D800/E, or D810, and why please? Nightly greetings from Germany. Well, I have the D810, I had the D800, and I've used the D750. You'll see the D750 review very soon. For me, the D810 is my preference for a few reasons. The control scheme, which differs from the D750, the quieter shutter, which differs from the D800, and the 30-minute video length of the D810 is nice for me as well compared to the shorter video duration of the D800. It's not just about those 3 features though. The D810 just gets so much of the little stuff right for me. Everyone's answer to this would be different though. On to Ken. Do you use the aspects that modern cameras bring? Active D-lighting, picture control, 59 focus points, etc., green auto, or jump to what's quicker at the time? I definitely take advantage of the newer tech. I work on and process some of my images, but for the majority of them, I want the final image the moment I take the shot. I have no problem using active D-lighting, auto ISO, and other features to get the shot that I want without wasting time while I'm capturing the image, nor spending a lot of time at my computer later on. Some folks will tell you to do everything as manual as possible, and that's how they shoot, and that's fine. My view is that each photographer should make their own decisions about the features that are available to them. Rahan, thanks for answering my previous question in your last video. My question is it possible to create same depth of field as of 50mm f1.8 lens by using a zoom lens of 18 to 250 f3.5 to 6.3 by varying distance from subject somehow? I read somewhere that it is possible. If yes, then what is the significance of a prime lens? Any comments you have experienced it? I think what you mean is how can you blur the background the same with the zoom as with the 50mm f1.8 lens? And yes, with the zoom, you will want to be as close to the subject as you can, but without creating displeasing perspective distortion. And you will want the background as far from the subject as possible. This may not give you something exactly like the 50mm would produce, but keeping the subject as far away from the background elements as possible may get you part of the way there. Brian asks, hi, Canon 7D versus 7D Mark II. Is the difference in price worth paying for an amateur? Interested in bird and airplane photography, what is your opinion, please? Probably no. Quality lenses and working on your technique and your style will almost always make a greater impact on your results than a new camera body. I feel like a broken record, but it's true. For moving objects, practice and improving your skills will make more of a difference than which of the 2 camera bodies you purchase. Philip, what's your favorite Photoshop plugin and why? The only one I use right now is a filter set from Nik called Color Efex Pro 4. I also have Silver Efex Pro 2, which I sometimes use. They're both really flexible and fun to play around with, and I use them fairly often on shots that I post on my site. Ray wants to know, hi SnapChick, if you could travel back in time and photograph anything that has happened in the past, what would you photograph and what gear would you use? Anything, huh? I think I would say that if I could travel back in time anywhere, I think I'd set my time machine to random. I'd want to get dumped somewhere and have something like my D300S and a 35mm prime lens, or my D810 and a 50mm, a great all-around body and a crisp normal lens. A solid setup. but I think I'd like to make the request to be invisible so I wouldn't freak anybody out. Adam, you mentioned in a previous post that you get really emotionally vested in wedding jobs in general. What do you think you shoot with an emotional connection for all your jobs? How does that inform your art? I can get emotionally invested. If I don't allow myself to, I find that my work isn't as good. I want my clients and anyone that looks at any of my work to have an emotional reaction. So I envision what they feel, what I want them to feel when looking at the photos, what I want someone to feel when they look at a landscape of mine or even a picture of my coffee cup. For example, at the risk of being utterly cheesy and a bit literal, I once shot a wedding at a venue that had a huge weathered mural of a scene from Cinderella outside. There is one photo of the bride and groom where they are in front of it kissing, and I have them pretty small in the corner of the frame. I want them to look at the photo, make the connection between them and Cinderella and her Prince Charming, and feel the immensity of getting married, like that big mural behind them. People ask me almost every day about gear and settings for weddings or particular shots that I post. And sharing information is fine, but your gear and the perfect settings with a shot that the client doesn't connect with doesn't win the day. You, of course, need to be a competent photographer, but if you can't put yourself in the shoes of the client and their emotions, you will struggle. When you do this well, clients will rave about you because you've touched their heart. Vern also wants to know about the D800 versus the D810. I know you have photographed with both camera models. Is the D810 focusing ability that much greater over the D800? I own and use the D800 and was thinking in upgrading to the D810. The cost in doing is great, but I keep thinking from what I have read that the focus will be sharper and clearer. My Nikon lenses I use are the 28-70 and the 70-200 f2.8 for both. If you will answer this question of mine, it will be greatly appreciated. See your photo above reminds me of a photo I photographed in Afghanistan. Both have Barbie dolls, and he shared a photo. I've not noticed a practical difference in focusing when I'm out in the real world. Now, I feel that the D810 is the camera that the D800 should have been in so many ways for me. But the D800 is a fantastic body, and if you like it, keep it. Federico says, I had a sport injury. Right now I have to use a crutch to walk. Any suggestion for how to keep shooting in such a condition? Also, do you think that participating in photo contests, online and offline, can help a photographer grow? That sucks. I hope you get well soon. If you can, keep a compact camera with you. You'll be able to sling it around your neck or slip it into your pocket between shots when you're hobbling around. Maybe there's even a way to hack that crutch into a monopod or attach one to it. As for your question about photo contests, I think anytime you pick up your camera, you have a chance to grow. However, I think entering a contest with the hope of capturing someone else's idea of an ideal image may be counterproductive if you're trying to develop as an artist. Samuel, what is your post workflow like? Do you use any Wacom tablets for photo editing, any contour design controllers for video editing, or is it all keyboard and mouse? And if I join your VIPs, can I take you out to dinner to a cheese restaurant like French Laundry or the restaurant at Meadowood? I do use my phone for fun editing. I like the Snapseed app a lot, but I use my computer for most things. I use Aperture, Lightroom, and Photoshop. There's no reason that most people would need all three, though. I use all three because I'm SnapChick and I answer questions about this stuff every day. For video, I use Final Cut Pro X. For controllers, a keyboard and a trackball, or my Apple Magic Mouse. Now, you should think twice before you'd want to go to a restaurant with me. I'm a really bad date. Greg wants to know what's a good but not too expensive of a telephoto lens to start with for sports. Depends on your camera and the light you'd be shooting in. Send me an email and I can help you out. Rajinder, 2 questions. 1, as we can control ambient light and light on subject if we are using speed lights. Is there any way to control light on subject and background light if we have only one light source, ambient light? 2, when you coming to India? Second question first. I have no plans to travel to India, but I want to go everywhere. If you only have ambient light, your control method is positioning of you and the subject to take advantage of the light that you do have. If you have a speed light and want more ambient light, you can do what's called dragging the shutter, which is to have the flash fire, but then a slower shutter speed than normal to allow the camera to capture the background. If you want to isolate the subject and reduce ambient light, shoot with the speed light at the camera's sync speed. Zahir Rule says, "Hi, thanks for answering my question. My question is, are Nikon D200 still a good for street/portraits shooting, and can you make a short review of it?" I don't have a D200 to review, but there certainly isn't anything inherently wrong with it. It's older technology, but can you get great shots with it? Sure you can. People have been using it for almost a decade. Its weakness compared to current generation cameras is that it has more noise at higher ISO settings. But it's a fast, durable camera. I know that it wouldn't hold me back, as it has many of the qualities that I like about my D300S. Kevin says, "Okay, how was the D750? I had left Nikon for the Sony Alpha 7 and I love it, but the D750 is very tantalizing. Now that you have spent time with both, I would appreciate your thoughts on which one is the overall best general purpose camera." Here I am, being a broken record again. There is no best camera. The Alpha 7 is great. The D750 is great. The difference is how you like to shoot and how you like the camera. Caden says, "Can I get a fan sign?" What's a fan sign? Joe, "Have you ever shot concert photography? If so, what type of settings do you use and did you get any published? Any idea of where I could look for publication?" I have. From orchestras to headbangers to bagpipes, though none have been published in any big way. As with anything, the equipment and settings I use depend upon the situation. For something like a rock concert, you need fast lenses to deal with low light. Also, the camera body needs to be one that can focus in low light. The focus aspect is often overlooked and can be extremely frustrating. This is one type of photography where spending more on a camera body can really make the job easier. Increasing the ISO usually isn't a problem for this type of photography, as a bit of noise is expected and can add to the mood. Now, if you're looking for publication, I'd start local. Call up your local newspaper or even an indie publication and see what they say. Oscar asks, "Is ETTL always the best route to go when using a speedlight?" No. It's going to adjust its output from shot to shot. If you're running and gunning, that may be what you want. If you're working in a studio environment, you probably don't want the lighting changing on its own from shot to shot. Most often, my speed lights are set to manual. Sadat says, "I had no word, just wow, best of luck." Well, that is a great way to end. Thanks, Sadat. And that's all of my questions for today. Thanks for sticking with me. Look for my next call for questions on my Facebook page, but feel free to ask me anything, anytime on Facebook, Twitter, email, YouTube. If you see me on the street or on the trails, I'll do my best to answer.